People think secrets are whispered in dark rooms or hidden in password-protected diaries. Mine never made it that far. They sat shamelessly behind my eyes, raw and unfiltered, until I married Amelia. She looked at me across our wedding table like she already owned me, body and soul. And maybe she did, because she came with an empire. 3 companies, 2 mansions, and a name my father used to spit out over cheap whiskey. The Voss dynasty. A dynasty I now woke up next to every morning, wrapped in silk sheets I used to dream of as a broke college kid. In public, I played my part perfectly, doting husband, polite social trophy. But in my mind, I was honest, brutally honest, about how she chewed too slowly at dinner parties, how her mother's smile made my teeth itch, how the Voss money smelled faintly of rot and old privilege, and how someday I'd carve out my own success that had nothing to do with her last name. I never said it aloud. I didn't have to. My private mental tirades were my last patch of freedom. Or so I thought. Amelia never raised her voice, never threw plates. She didn't even sigh when I stumbled home drunk from networking events I called business. Instead, she'd watch me, eyes soft, lips curved in that half smile that felt more like a signed confession I hadn't written yet. I told myself she was just patient, kind, maybe too fragile to confront a husband who secretly resented her wealth and her control over every square inch of our life. I didn't know back then that fragility was a lie. That silence can be sharper than any threat. People envy me. They see the tailored suits, the sports car she gifted me on our first anniversary, the luxury weekends in Paris I never paid a cent for. They don't see the invisible leash I wrapped around my own throat, one careless thought at a time. Because in our house, marble floors, oil paintings older than my entire bloodline, my mind was never just mine. Not really. And every ugly word I dared to think about her was a brick she quietly stacked, building a cage I wouldn't notice until it was sealed shut. Even now, recalling it, my scalp prickles with a dread I can't drown with whiskey. Back then, I called it love. She called it something else entirely. I'm telling this now because if you ever think you know what your partner can and cannot see, think again. The mind is a dangerous thing to share, even when you believe it's locked behind your eyes. And I, God help me, gave her the key the day I said I do. It started with a single doubt, a splinter in my brain I kept trying to flick away. 6 months after our wedding, I caught Amelia watching me sleep. Not the tender, newlywed stare people giggle about. This was different, a quiet, surgical gaze, as if she were listening to something I couldn't hear. I joked about it over breakfast. If you keep staring, I'll start charging you rent for the view. She only smiled, poured my coffee, and asked if I'd been dreaming about Lydia again. My hand jerked so hard I nearly spilled the mug. Lydia, my college ex, my reckless what if, I'd buried deep in some neural attic. I hadn't spoken her name aloud in years. Not to Amelia, not to anyone. I laughed it off, told her she must have heard wrong, that she probably mixed up names from old stories I drunkenly shared when we were dating. She just tilted her head, as if studying the lie peeling off my lips like cheap wallpaper. That night, when I lay beside her, I tried to think of nothing. Nothing, nothing, nothing. But the mind is a traitor. Every suppressed word seeps out eventually. A week later, she asked if my headaches were worse after I ranted about her father's hypocrisy in my head during brunch with her family. She asked it so gently, like a nurse soothing a delirious patient. I nodded dumbly, throat bone dry. I started testing her. Small, stupid experiments. I'd imagine insulting her favorite painting, a gaudy Baroque monstrosity in the study. The next morning, she'd casually mention maybe it was time to redecorate that wall. Once drunk on leftover scotch and my own paranoia, I pictured how I'd cheat. Not that I'd actually do it, but I wanted to see if she'd react. The next day, she booked us a surprise weekend away, somewhere remote with no cell signal. She made love to me like she was soldering my body to hers. Like any gap between us could kill her. Or me. After that, my mind wasn't a safe room anymore. It was a glass coffin. But I kept pretending. Outwardly, I was the golden husband. A soft smile, a gentle hand on her lower back at Gallus, murmured thank yous for the life I pretended to help build. Inside, I was rotting, and that's when the second betrayal began. My own. I thought if I couldn't own my thoughts, I'd own my freedom. I took secret meetings with venture capitalists, pitching an app I'd coded at night in a locked basement office. An app that, if funded, could carve my name into the tech scene without a cent of Voss money. It was sloppy, my NDAs, my hidden bank account, but I was desperate for a life untouched by her omniscient love. One night, drunk on the thrill of deception, I nearly confessed it in my mind. I pictured myself handing her divorce papers once the IPO hit. I imagined telling her she could keep her empire. I'd finally built mine from scratch. The next morning, she served me breakfast in bed, eyes twinkling. She handed me a little white envelope. I thought it was another anniversary card. It was a copy of my secret bank statement. She didn't yell, didn't accuse me of theft or betrayal. She just sat beside me, stroking my hair like I was a trembling pet, and whispered, "Do you feel better now that you've tried to be your own man?" My skin went cold, because she wasn't angry. She was amused, like a mother catching her child with chocolate smeared all over his face, denying he stole from the jar. I told myself I'd fight harder, hide better, encrypt files, use burner phones, stash contracts off-site. But the problem was never the trail I left in the world. The problem was that every plan was born and died in the traitorous echo chamber of my skull. Some nights I'd wake up sweating, her arm draped across my chest like a velvet chain. I'd stare at the ceiling and wonder if she was listening to my nightmares. If she sat there, plucking my fears straight from the bone marrow of my brain. But I stayed, because I still loved her. Or maybe I loved the version of me that didn't exist without her money. I couldn't tell the difference anymore. And all the while, she kept building something behind her calm smile. Some nights I'd see her on our balcony, barefoot in her silk robe, staring at the city lights like she could bend them to her will. Maybe she could. After all, she'd bent me. I thought betrayal was an affair, a stolen password, a hidden account. But betrayal is quieter than that. It's every secret thought you swear is yours alone, until you realize it never was. And by then, she was ready to teach me how deep a mind can sink when it's no longer yours to control. I started counting my thoughts, as if giving them numbers could make them safer. Thought 1, leave her. Thought 2, empty the offshore account she didn't know about. I hoped. Thought 3, disappear. Change my name. Start over somewhere my past couldn't find me. But each number bloomed into a bloom of other thoughts. Too many roots to clip. A man can't stop thinking, even if he slices out his own tongue. The more I tried to cage my mind, the more it turned on itself. I couldn't look at Amelia without imagining tearing her secret out of her skull, seeing how it worked. I pictured electrodes, scalpels, and confessions. The images made me nauseous, ashamed, and yet under the shame, a pulse of powerlessness that burned hotter every day. I began to test her more cruelly. Silent insults turned into fantasies of her ruin. I'd imagined telling the tabloids she was insane, leaking faked medical records, forging psych evaluations that painted her as unstable. I imagined sitting in a lawyer's office, signing away the marriage while the press ate her alive. And every time she'd disarm me with her endless calm, she'd touch my cheek at dinner parties when I bristled at her father's jokes. She'd whisper, I looked tired when I replayed my hateful plots behind my eyes. She always knew. One night, drunk again, the only time my brain ever felt hazy enough to hide, I stood over her while she slept. The moon caught her lashes, her parted lips, the rise and fall of her ribs. She looked breakable then. I wanted to believe it. I thought, do you hurt of this? Do you feel how much I want to ruin you? Her eyes flickered open. She didn't flinch. She only reached up, brushed my temple with her fingertips and murmured, "Shh, go back to bed." I stumbled backward like I'd been caught committing a murder. Sleep became dangerous. I couldn't trust what I dreamed. Sometimes I'd see her in my nightmares, standing at the edge of a black ocean, pulling thought after thought out of my head like silver fish. She'd smile, slip them into her pocket, and walk into the surf while I screamed myself awake. I started staying out late, hotels, bars, anywhere to drown the noise in other people's chatter. But she was always there, in my skull, a ghost that didn't need a room key. One Thursday, I woke up in a motel on the edge of town, my phone dead, my wallet gone. On the nightstand was a simple note in her handwriting: "Come home. No threats, no accusations. Just a command, sweet as poison." It wasn't long before my secret venture collapsed. Investors pulled out mysteriously, whispered rumors of fraud, questionable code, legal disputes I never saw coming. My lawyer quit without explanation. My offshore account evaporated overnight, locked up by routine audits I couldn't untangle. And through it all, Amelia cooked dinner. Amelia kissed my forehead. Amelia told the world her brilliant husband was taking a sabbatical to focus on our family. Our family, the two of us. No kids, no pets. Just her and my mind, stripped bare, held up like a trophy I could no longer hide behind my polite smile. I tried to confront her once. We were in the garden. Hers, not mine. She tended roses like she tended me, pruning ruthlessly, letting only what she loved survive. I grabbed her wrist, hard enough to make her gasp. "What are you?" I demanded. "How do you do it?" She didn't pull away. She laid her free hand over mine, the way a mother might calm a startled child. "Darling," she said, so soft I almost wept, "you gave me everything the day you decided to think cruel thoughts instead of saying kind ones. I didn't take your mind. You abandoned it in my hands." She kissed my knuckles. I wanted to break them against her teeth. Instead, I dropped her wrist and ran inside, locking myself in the basement office that wasn't mine anymore. I tried to leave. 3 times. The first time I booked a flight to Montreal under a fake name. At the gate, security flagged my ticket as fraudulent. I was escorted out, humiliated, my phone buzzing with her calm text. "Are you lost, love?" The second time, I stole her spare car keys and made it as far as the state line before blue lights filled the rear view. The officer handed me back to Amelia herself, who waited calmly at a roadside diner, sipping tea while I babbled excuses like a child who'd failed a bedtime curfew. The third time, I didn't bother with cars or planes. I just walked. For miles, no phone, no wallet, just my feet on cold asphalt until they bled through my socks. And still, I swear I felt her. Not beside me, inside me. Each step brought a whisper. "Come home." When I staggered back at dawn, half mad with exhaustion, she opened the door before I could knock. She pressed her lips to my forehead like a benediction. "Now can we try honesty?" Honesty, as if I had any left to give. I began talking to her out loud, hoping it would blunt the invasion. If she wanted access, fine. Let her have every filthy, hateful syllable straight from my tongue. But it didn't free me. It only made her more tender, more attentive. Some nights she'd crawl into my lap, cradle my face, and whisper all the things I never dared admit, even to myself: how small I'd always felt, how I resented needing her money, how I envied her effortless power, how I longed for her to break me just so I wouldn't have to pretend anymore. And in those moments, I couldn't hate her. I hated myself. By the time autumn bled into winter, I was no longer a husband. I was a relic, her favorite antique, polished and displayed, but never free to tarnish again. Our friends stopped calling. She said they were a bad influence. My parents moved abroad, a business opportunity she arranged for them. My phone stayed suspiciously empty of messages I didn't want her to see. She filled my days with curated tasks, charity boards I didn't care about, public appearances where I smiled on command, dinner parties where I spoke only when spoken to. And every night she tucked me into bed like a child too delicate to manage himself. I should have killed her, or myself. But the mind is a fragile thing, and mine was no longer strong enough to hold such thoughts without her permission. Instead, I stayed, and beneath the numbness, something new coiled in my gut. Not hate, not fear, something colder, something patient. If I couldn't reclaim my mind, maybe I could learn to infect hers instead. And so I began to dream on purpose. I used to believe my thoughts betrayed me, but I finally understood they were my last allies. If I couldn't shield them from Amelia, I would weaponize them instead. I began with small lies, sugar-wrapped poison hidden in daydreams, a plan to poison her tea, a fantasy of hiring a hitman through the dark web, a false memory of a lover hidden in Prague with compromising photos. She took the bait every time. The next day, she'd inspect the teacups, sniff for arsenic. She'd scroll through my phone logs. She'd stroke my face after dinner and ask so gently, "Are you still thinking about Prague?" Each lie tangled her deeper into my trap. For the first time, she was reacting to illusions instead of reading the truth, and illusions could not be verified. I was teaching her to doubt the voice she trusted most. Me. I made myself unpredictable. Some nights I wove brutal confessions into my dreams, that I hated her so completely I'd gouge her eyes out if I found the courage. The next morning, she'd watch me butter toast, her fingers drumming the marble counter, pulse flicking in her throat like a trapped bird. Other nights, I flooded my mind with pure, mundane static, baseball scores, childhood jingles, recipes for soups I'd never cook. I watched her face as she listened to my mental white noise, hungry for secrets but choking on trivial drivel. She started sleeping less. Her calm turned brittle. I caught her standing by our bed at 3 a.m., staring at my forehead like she could peel it back and find the truth cowering behind my skull. She whispered once, "Why are you hiding from me?" I almost laughed. She'd never sounded so human. When her control weakened, I struck, not with fists or poison, but with words, real words spoken aloud. We were in her study, her throne room, where she'd ruled over my mind like a sovereign. Books I hadn't read in years lined the walls. In the center, her favorite chair, deep red leather, the cradle of my confessions. She sat, cross-legged, silk robe whispering over her knee. She beckoned me closer with that same imperial gesture she'd always used to pull thoughts straight from my bones. But this time I didn't kneel. I stood before her, heartbeat a war drum in my chest. "Emilia," I said. My voice didn't tremble. "You've been listening so long you forgot how to hear." Her brow creased. "Darling, please don't." "No." I stepped closer. "Listen. Really listen. I want you to hear this with your ears, not your parasite trick." I inhaled, tasting my freedom in my throat for the first time in years. "I hate you. I loved you once, but you turned my mind into a hunting ground. So now, listen carefully. I'm setting fire to every thought you think you own." I saw it then, the fracture, the flicker of real fear in her eyes. She lunged for my face, fingers spread, like she could physically dig the lies out of my skull. I caught her wrists midair. For once, she felt fragile in my grip. Not the goddess who had puppeteered my neurons, but a woman terrified of losing her only power. I laughed. The sound startled us both. "I've packed our files," I hissed against her cheek. "Every secret, every illegal surveillance contract you buried under your father's name. By the time you finish guessing which ones are real, the world will be drowning in the story of Amelia Voss, the telepathic tyrant." "You're bluffing," she gasped, fighting my grip. "Am I?" I leaned closer, my breath mingling with hers. "Go on, read me. See if you can tell which part is true. Maybe it all is. Maybe it's nothing but a daydream, just for you." Her pupils blew wide. Confusion, rage, disbelief warring across the face I'd once traced with kisses. I shoved her back into the leather chair. She didn't rise. She just stared, chest heaving, trying to dig the truth from my grin and finding only fog. I didn't run. I walked out of that room, down the marble hallways of our gilded prison, out the front door she had always guarded so carefully. Outside, dawn crawled over the city. I filled my lungs with air she couldn't control, felt the cold bite my skin without her warmth pressing it back. She didn't follow, couldn't, because now she didn't know what was real. I had infected her certainty with my chaos. I had learned from the best parasite alive. I didn't look back at the house. It was just walls, money, memories of a man who thought he needed permission to exist. In my pocket, a flash drive, or maybe just a decoy. She'd never know. I whispered into the dawn, "Go ahead, Amelia. Listen harder. I dare you." And for the first time, the echo in my head was mine alone. It's strange how quiet the world is when you own your mind again. No footsteps behind me, no soft sigh threading through my thoughts. Just the ordinary hum of traffic, the city waking up, the rustle of my coat as I walk nowhere in particular. For a while, I expected to feel hollow. Emilia had wrapped so much of me in herself, I thought cutting her out would leave a cavern, an echo chamber. But it didn't. It just left me, raw, contradictory, fumbling. But me. I didn't vanish that morning. Disappearing completely would have been too easy. A coward's epilogue. Instead, I let her watch me live. The press found my files within 48 hours. Anonymous leaks, breadcrumbed through servers she couldn't scrub clean fast enough. Contracts, private recordings, evidence of the hidden surveillance startup she'd used to refine her gift. The world didn't believe she could read minds, not really, but they believed corporate espionage, blackmail, and hush money. I watched her on TV the week the news broke. She sat behind her lawyer, immaculate in black silk, an expression carved from ice. Every so often, her eyes flicked sideways, as if she could still feel me whispering behind her eyelids. I wondered what she heard now, whether she still clung to the trick that once made her untouchable. Maybe she was rifling through the courtroom's collective thoughts, desperate for one clean secret to save her. I smiled at the screen, sipping bitter coffee in a cheap cafe. No one would connect to a man like me. I didn't need her secrets anymore. I had my own. Freedom wasn't glamorous. The money was gone, mostly. My name, or at least the version the world knew, was radioactive. But anonymity felt like oxygen after suffocation. I found a basement apartment in a city where no one cared about my surname. I worked odd jobs under fake IDs. Sometimes I taught online coding classes, using my real voice for strangers who never asked about my past. At night, when I lay alone on a secondhand mattress, I talked to myself out loud. Not out of paranoia, but out of gratitude. Each word was proof I owned my thoughts. I rehearsed new lies, new truths, sometimes just nonsense syllables to remind myself no one was listening but me. Sometimes I caught myself missing her. Not the tyranny, the intimacy, the ease of never needing to explain myself, because she'd excavated every secret before I could stammer it into words. There was a twisted comfort in that prison. Total exposure means you never have to confess. But comfort is for the weak, and I'd grown tired of being weak. One rainy night, months later, I got a letter. No postage. Slid under my door like a stray cat. Inside, one line in her sharp, perfect script. How does it feel to be unreadable? No threat, no apology, just curiosity. I read it twice. Then I burned it over my kitchen sink, watching the flame devour the last remnant of the empire she'd built inside my skull. I whispered to the rising smoke, "It feels like freedom, Emilia. You should try it." I know she's still out there. She always will be. Maybe she still listens to other men's thoughts. Maybe she prowls boardrooms and bedrooms, the queen of silent confessions. Or maybe, just maybe, she's quieter now, forced to live with her own mind for once. I don't care. I'm not her keeper anymore. These days I keep a notebook beside my bed. I write down every thought worth saving. Dreams, ugly truths, stray scraps of hope. I keep some pages blank, a gift to myself, a place I won't let anyone read, not even me. Sometimes in crowded places, a bus stop, a bar, a midnight diner, I close my eyes and imagine her leaning in, desperate to eavesdrop, and I fill my head with a single silent message, clearer than any voice I ever used before. You don't own me. Once I believed betrayal broke me. Now I know better. It reassembled me. And if she's still listening somewhere, tangled in my ghosts, then good. Let her learn that a man who survives the theft of his mind becomes something more than a victim. He becomes his own secret, his own fortress. And this time, no one's getting in. For support, do like, comment, and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you.